morning, everyone. My name is Avinash, and on behalf of Bioinnovate Technologies Private Limited, I would like to welcome all of you for joining us for today's webinar into the research world. Uh, as part of our ongoing interaction series with eminent research scientists from across the country, today we have the privilege of hosting Dr. Atya Kaple. She's Senior Principal Scientist at CSIR National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, and her research interests are in the field of environmental genomics. Apart from her regular research responsibilities, she is also the acting vice president for the Asia Pacific region of OWST. So it is a great privilege and a matter of honor for all of us to have the privilege of interacting with her and getting to know more about her research interest. So without taking much time, I would like to invite Dr. Atya to take over. Dr. Atya.
Thank you, Avinash, for that very nice introduction. And thank you, everybody who has joined in to listen to my lecture today. And a very big thank you to Bioinnovate for arranging this, and Dr. Avadh Shah and Avinash for really arranging this. So today I'm going to talk to you about how metagenomics can be used in the environment. You know, we have many students who come to us, and they always have this notion that metagenomics is to be used in say development of probiotics or medical research or drugs, pharmas, but nobody really thinks of how it can be used in the environment. And I'm going to show you today exactly how we at NEERI are utilizing this to develop our environmental solutions. So I'll just share my screen. Just bear with me for a little while. It says host disabled participant screen sharing, Avinash.
Yes, ma'am. Just a second. Ma'am, please, if you could try now. It's visible, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just going to slideshow. Yeah, you can see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so practical applications for the environment, you know. So before I actually start, I would just like to very briefly share where I come from. Like Avinash said, I work in the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. It's under the umbrella of the CSIR, you know, that's the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research under the Ministry of Science and Technology. It has 38 different national laboratories and a few other centers, and NEERI is one of them. And very proudly, I can say that NEERI is the only national laboratory that is totally dedicated to finding environmental solutions for the country, and has evolved over a period of years depending on the need of the country at different times. We are based at Nagpur, but we have 5 zonal centers at Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, Chennai, and for the country. This is a drone image of our institute. It is a really beautiful place to work in. And today I'm going to be talking about this molecule that is actually the blueprint of our lives. Not only just you and me, I'm sure you all know that every living thing will rise of its metagenome. Of course, the bacteria are already there. The microbial world is there, which is not seen to you. But even if you have roots, your leaves fall in it, or even your doggy uses that a piece of land, every single biological event can be understood from the metagenome. It's just that you have to know how to read it. So I'm going to just take you through what we do at NIRI. But first, distinction between genomics and metagenomics. Study of genome of a single individual. I am dealing more with bacteria, so I will say study of a single bacterium would be genomics, and a community of a target niche would be metagenomics. So that's the basic difference between genomics and metagenomics. Metagenomics allows us to look at the microbial population. It gives us a role of each microorganism in the environment. It gives you the functional capacity of a niche. You can look at new pathways, you can look at new genes, and there are so many things that can be mined from a metagenome of any sample. The question comes is, why do we need to study all this in an environmental institute? We need to study this because we have entirely disturbed the ecosystem balance of our uh, earth. Biodiversity loss, many of you would have read about. So what does it actually mean? Your loss of species interferes in food chain. Your food chain is disrupted. How much of human health problems are emerging because of this ecosystem disbalance. So many new diseases keep coming up every other day. We have economic growth, but it is without sustainability. And so basically ecosystem functioning and stability has really gone for a toss. So this is why we have genomics. Now, if you look at this phylogenetic tree, this was developed by the University of Colorado, and it is only the animal kingdom. You can look at the huge number of species that comprise of the animal kingdom. And this little small blue line is us, you and me. But this little line has been responsible for changing the entire balance of this planet. Just look at how staggering that information is. The diversity, the number of species compared to us, but we are the ones who are responsible for causing all these kind of disturbance, which is really a frightening thought, and it should be reflected upon. Now, over the period of years, biodiversity changes are a part of the norm. So the system takes time to recover and reboot. But when we are changing this 1,000-fold to what is in nature, we entirely disrupt the species. So the metagenome holds the key to this restoration process. It tells us about the microbial population. Of course, I already said that. And why I keep harping on microbial population is because that when the earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago, the bacteria are the only living things that continued from there to here. They have the key to survival. They are able to adapt to all the changes that have gone in these many millions of years and still survive. So we need to use them as a key to restore back the environment. So there are so many reactions that are going on unseen to us, because the microbial population, it is said that only 5% is culturable. So the remaining 95% is what we get out of our metagenome. So whenever we design a remediation protocol or a methodology, we use a knowledge-based approach blind. So how is this done? I'm going to take you through some examples of what is being done at NIRI using the metagenome analysis. Now, this is a scenario that is very, common. All of us have seen this in any part of city, town. Some places it's more and some places it's less. So we have been trying to resolve that, and segregate and compost are the two major fundamentals of diminishing that kind of waste. But if you do not compost right, if you don't keep your quality right, if your composting is not done well, there will be so much of odor generation. You definitely don't want to be living in that kind of a place, where it is smelly, and you are just creating another heap of junk from one heap to the other heap if you don't control your compost. But of course, there's a lot of good composting also that is happening. So what we need to do is understand the microbial community of the good compost, to understand the processes, why some go bad and why some make a good compost. How do we, improve the quality, and use metagenomics to actually improve the quality and create a wealth out of a waste. But I'm going to focus on water. That's my main area of work, and so I will be spending a little more time where metagenomics we are using in the to tell you is a very essential part of life. But 70% of our freshwater reserves go into agriculture. You know, so leaving very little for us as potable water. Drinking water reserves are going down, so we really need to find ways to actually reuse that water and take the burden off the agriculture and other fresh water. Now, there are very few in India who have this privilege of drinking water out of the tap. In fact, I really don't know anybody who does that, but I'm sure in the country there are some who can do it. The actual reality of our country is this. Many people have to walk down miles to get water, and this tanker that you can see here is not rural India, it's urban India, where we have drinking water supply only on every alternate days or something. There are many cities like that in urban India who also face this. So it is really imperative that we actually wake up and do something very concrete about it. A lot of research is going on. I'm not saying that it is not, but we need to address this in a very serious manner. So at NIRI, we work very diligently for wastewater reuse. We analyze the natural attenuation capacity of a wastewater treatment plant, and we work out ways to improve the biological degradation process. So we took we did a metagenome analysis of activated in an industry taxonomy, its function, its stress response, and we try to put new dimensions into wastewater treatment. This is a KEGG map. All the biology students, little nodes are the actions of the reactions. So from our analysis of the activated biomass, we mapped out these little nodes, and we did a very classical experiment, based on what was the incoming influent chemicals into this induction experiment, and improve the degradation efficiency of this biomass of the industry. You can see in this graph, the uninduced sludge is the one you can see in red, and the removal of COD was much better when we just did an induction of the sludge. It was a pilot experiment that really worked very well, where we just take the sludge induce it and recirculate it back into the activated reactor in ascertaining the performance niche that was created here in India, because there are many small scale industries that cannot bear the cost of having a fully functional um, effluent treatment plant. So what was done was that these kind of, they function like a cooperative. So you get all your industries, you transport your water to a common treatment place, and your wastewater gets treated before it can be released into the environment. But the problem here is, since it's a biological process, the bacteria in that activated sludge, one day they are treating wastewater that's coming from textile, and the next day from pharma. So you see the stress that the microbes are placed in because of this kind of changing scenario of the influent. So what we did was, we mapped the oxygenases in this treatment plant. So because why oxygenases? Because this is an aerobic process, and of course oxygenases play a very important role. So all these dotted lines that you can see are the enzymes that are present in the target effluent treatment plant, and the ones in the bold lines like here are the ones that are not present. So if your treatment plant is going to get chemicals like aniline or phenanthrene, your plant is definitely not going to be treating them, and it's just going to pass out into the wastewater. And so what we need to do is generate this kind of maps for the different CTPs, and then treat or pre-treat your chemicals, making them amenable to this activated biomass. So this gives you an information that you can use actually to improve your treatment efficiency. We also had curiosity of the scientists. We thought that since oxygenases, functional genes are more or less reported than the taxonomy, and so we thought that we'll just look at our oxygenases and compare it to different geographical locations. So this one, the one in pink, this one is our treatment plant in India, and the green is from Hong Kong. It's an ETP in Hong Kong, and this blue is from a tannery in China, and this is from an oxygenase from Denmark. Okay, so you can see how much of overlap is there. Functional overlap is there between the oxygenases of unrelated and systems that are really far apart. So this actually gave us a clue that when we do bioaugmentation in say treatment plants, putting a handful of bacteria into something that is already so abundant with microflora may not work as much as if you take a handful of biomass from something that you want to complement. Like for example, from tree, if you need enzymes from here, you can just take some activated biomass and use it instead of trying to find different bacteria that may or may not endure your new niche. So taking that further, we look at what we say is the microbial community intelligence. So what we did here was that we mapped each and every pathway that is present in a treatment plant. So it gives us complete information on what are the biodegradative pathways that are going. Now, all this list, this is just giving you a title of what pathways that are functioning. But metagenomics also gives you the abundance of all of these not being biodegraded, which pathway you need to activate or you need to segment and get your treatment plant functioning. What we also did here was that we mapped all the bacteria that can degrade a particular family. All these numbers are of different genera. So we classified the chemicals of that plant into different families, and we looked at all the bacteria that are already there. So when I say a knowledge based approach, this is exactly what I mean. So when you say bioaugmentation, and if you do a culturable approach, it's really going to take you forever to do a trial and error and try to get your activated biomass working. But if you have a picture like this, you know which are the bacteria available, which are not available. So you can make a proper knowledge based strategy to the industry, to help it. So this is what metagenomics does, can be used in the industrial sector. And so now I come to the domestic wastewater. This is again a very common sight. That India has only 30% of treatment capacity for its generation of its domestic wastewater. The remaining 70% just goes down these drains to the nearest water body, and thus we pollute all our rivers, lakes, and whatever water bodies are near. Whenever a town comes up, the first thing they do is make a drain like this and connect it to the nearest water body. So you're very sure that your water body is going to be polluted. So the challenges of treating this kind of water is, you can see that it's just not the sewage flow, all the solid waste is also being dumped into it. Then you have to deal with a lot of variation in pollutant levels. So like you have say different timings, you have different flows, you have community wise, if a larger community is there, then you have it on a, you have a larger load to be treated. If it's a smaller community, the load is different. So there is no like one size fits all kind of a scenario. That's the sad part. So for every niche that you need to treat, you have to do a background search and develop a solution that is important for that niche. And cost, of course, if we had the resources, then we would not have had this kind of sewage problems in the first place. So we need to keep cost, and it should be easy on operation and maintenance when you develop some kind of a treatment option. So NIRI has developed a lot of decentralized treatment options, and I'm going to share an example of something that we are really very proud of what we have done during the Kumbh Mela in January this year. So we did the in situ drain treatments at Prayagraj. That is the Ganga river that you can see in the background, and beyond that bridge is the Sangam point where all the pilgrims come to take the holy dip. And the land you can see across is where the entire tents and camps was set up. So we went there, and what we did was, you can see on this side is the drain that was before we do this beautiful drain. So it not only treats your water, it also gives aesthetics. You would definitely not be wanting to take a walk in this kind of a scenario, but here I'm sure you wouldn't mind walking down this path even though there is a drain. So our technology is called RENEW. It's an acronym for the restoration of nalas using the ecological units. Not very visibly you can see this is the inlet and this is the outlet, so you can see the difference in the treatment, the efficiency of our treatment on site. This is image of where we actually did our, where everybody comes to take their holy dip. So we did this drain treatment into these drains that were leading into the Sangam point. And what we did actually, I'll just show you by one picture. You can see this was the drain of this locality, this orange line, and we convert it into a pakka nala. So the first step is to convert it into like a pakka nala. So then there is no slush also around, and your breeding of mosquitoes and all that menace also stops. And you can see these workers, they are instilling different components of our wastewater treatment into the nala itself. So this is like one mobile STP. It has your sedimentation, it has biodegradation, it has aeration, it has phytoremediation, it has everything. As the water flows, it goes through all these different units and it gets treated. So these are just some of the pictures that were during when we were making this. And you look at the outlet of the drain. I am really so proud to be a part of this team who made this whole process be the color of the, and the Kumbh, we actually had to put a guard here because people found this water so clean that they were coming here to wash their hands and feet into the in this drain treated water. That was the level of efficiency that we could achieve there. So we also did a metagenome analysis to look at the functioning of these units and look at how we can, improve them. So like I already told you, the metagenome is the blueprint of all biological activity. And very honestly, I can't find a better picture than from this reference to explain what, a metagenome analysis, what information we can get out of metagenome analysis. Now at any treatment site, in the natural environment, you assume that these are all the molecules or the pollutants that are coming into your sample, into your wastewater. So if I take any one molecule and follow the process of degradation right up to central metabolism and then complete biodegradation of this compound, each one of this is one PhD thesis, So if I have to do all this, it will definitely be not be in my lifetime. It's just too many years of work. If we go by the conventional method, like I said, is anaerobic. So this publication from Environmental Microbiology by some unknown author really gives you a very nice picture of what information we can get out of a metagenome. And we have tried to use this in our analysis.
Hello.
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
see?
Yeah, ma'am. The screen is visible. Only if you could just, ma'am, the voice is breaking in between.
Yeah, I'll just turn off the video 1 second. I have to stop share to do, no. Yeah, so the video is already muted. Now you can see?
Yeah, the screen is visible, ma'am. Your screen is visible.
Yeah, and audio?
Audio is breaking a bit.
Okay, unfortunate.
Yes,
So let me see if I can increase the volume. Okay, let's hope it's better now.
yeah, better than before.
Okay.
Yes, it's. I think they are able to hear properly. Everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. So we looked at mainly the aerobic and the anaerobic bacteria because both are important in biodegradation. You know, the anaerobic bacteria, they do a better biodegradation and they create less sludge, which is what we want in the environmental scenario. So we looked at the aerobic and anaerobic bacterial at different class levels, and we looked at the metabolism of the aromatic compounds in different units. So you can see we have categorized in the peripheral pathways or the central aromatic and the anaerobic degradation. So whenever you talk of wastewater treatment, the measurement is always in COD and BOD. So what that actually biochemically translates into is the catabolism of aromatic compounds. So if we look at the metagenome of all the units, it will tell us which is functioning well and which we need to improve by different means. Like for example, in the biomat, we also have our own bacteria that we are introducing into those biomats to help in biodegradation. So depending on this metagenome analysis, we will decide which kind of bacteria are required in which kind of a niche. And then wastewaters, the domestic wastewaters, the main culprits are nitrogen and phosphorus, which cause eutrophication of lakes. So we also look at the genes of the nitrogen cycle, and we find that many of these allotoin genes are present, which are there in the root nodules to take up the nitrogen. So we also have a phytoremediation component. We use wetland plants into the system so they can take up all this excess of nitrogen. We can also actually map on the KEGG pathway which of the nitrogen pathway genes are present or absent, so we know the efficiency of nitrogen metabolism, whether it's happening or whether we need to tune it up a little more. Similarly for phosphorus. And this is not actually a part of wastewater treatment in the renew system, but since we have the metagenome, we mind to study the antibiotic resistance mechanisms. You know that the new problem that is coming up here in our country is the antibiotic resistant pathogens. So we thought we'd look at the domestic wastewater and see if there are the genes are coming from there. So because like I told you, bacteria are just this amazing set of microorganisms. They uptake whatever that helps them to survive. So if they are for very long in the presence of different antibiotics or pharmaceuticals, they develop a resistance. So we just tried listing out whatever the kind of mechanisms that are there in our wastewater streams. And a very disturbing thing is you look at the multi-drug resistant to the transporters, for all the units, they roughly remain the same, so your treated water is actually not going to be addressing this when you look in any STP, unless you do like a chlorination or a disinfection step. So now what we are doing is we are adding a disinfection step at the end of our treatment to ensure that the pathogens also get killed when you release this water. But this is like a wake up call for all wastewater treatment plants. The norm of just looking at BOD and COD is not enough. There are so many health complications coming up with multi-drug resistance that it is really crucial to do one simple metagenome analysis and map your multi-drugs? Are you creating hotspots for the development of multi-drug resistant bacteria? This is something that really is very crucial and needs to be taken up across the country if we are to be able, before this bomb bursts on us and becomes uncontrollable, we really need to incorporate all this uh, into our treatment processes. And now, since I am on multi-drugs and health, I should not leave out the COVID fight. I'm just shifting gears now to tell you a little bit about the role of genomics into the COVID fight and CSIR's role on this. Now, CSIR is fighting the COVID fight with the government of India on many different fronts. But one of them, where we are using genomics, is the digital and molecular surveillance. So I will just share with you what CSIR is doing. But first, why do we need to do surveillance? Now, this red frame guy, this is an example of, this represents the infected person, and this represents the not infected persons. So, if one infected person comes in contacts with a number of people, they in turn come in contact with so many, and the whole thing spreads. So if you don't do any kind of surveillance, this is a kind of a scenario that you're looking at, the spread of this uh, infection. But if you do a surveillance, if, for example, I have been able to do a surveillance and spot that this person is infected, I quarantine and isolate him, and surveillance is really very important. And CSIR is actually working very diligently to help the government of India by doing the surveillance, and it will help them frame policies, for the nation, that is going to play a very important role in bringing India back to normal on all fronts. Basically, what surveillance helps us to do is it will monitor trends in the disease. It will rapidly detect communities that will serve as future hotspots. So you quarantine and you segregate so that the hotspots get neutralized. And it, of course, like I said, it provides a guide to our preparedness level. So what CSIR is doing is, we are gathering information about the virus. We are doing pooled testing so that you have a greater outreach, and of course, a patient-centric approach where you look at the history of patient travel and whom they have met and that. CSIR has sequenced already 150 genomes, and 100 are in the pipeline, and more are being done. Very soon we will have different laboratories in CSIR, and this will provide us very crucial information on, it will be able to reveal the genetic codes of this viral pathogenesis, its life cycle, the variants that are coming up and are being reported, what are the drug binding patterns. All this information gets revealed in sequencing the viral metagenome, and comparison of sequences across the different geographical locations of India will really help us to win over this pandemic. So basically, what all you can do is you can discover the genetic variants that are usually linked to the virulence within the virus genome. What are the hotspots that are causing the virulence? You map the evolution of the virus and the geographical location vis-a-vis the virulence severity. Some strains are said to be more severe and some are not. Some people are able to fight. So this kind of information we can gather from the sequencing. It's a battle with the corona that has to be fought on all fronts, and genomics is one very such important front. And this is being done in different laboratories of CSR like IGIB in Delhi, IMTech in Chandigarh, CCMB, and a number of places. And nearly very soon we are gearing up to do a metatranscriptomics to survey the presence of the virus in the environmental samples. Now nobody is very sure whether it really survives in the environment, whether it is going to be a future threat for us, does it remain in the environment? And so a study like this will be able to tell us how safe we are going to be in future. And I changed from metagenomics to metatranscriptomics because this is an RNA virus. So when you talk of DNA, you use the term metagenomics, and when you use RNA, then you use the term metatranscriptomics. So I thought this lecture will not be complete without addressing some points of the current crisis that we are all looking at. So I will just end with telling you what are the different, recapping what are the different ways in which you can use metagenomics. You know, the rumen microbiome. You can look for hydrolysis enzymes that, for your energy sector. You can look at probiotics for your health. We can use wastewater as a resource using metagenomics, bioremediation, which I talked about a little more in detail, fighting diseases like I have told you just now. So basically, metagenomics is about harnessing the microbial community intelligence and putting it to use for our benefit. So thank you if you have stayed with me for this long. Thank you very much, and I'm really sorry. I hope that the audio was not really so bad that you get the message I was trying to share. Hello?
Hello. Yeah, ma'am. Hello. Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah.
There are a few questions. Can I take them up?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay. So there's a question from. I'll start from the latest question which I have received, and then we'll move towards the first one which was sent. So
Yeah.
Mr. Jagdish has asked a few questions here. His question is first is which part of V1 V9 region for amplicon sequencing is important and why?
So actually, then that again, it depends on the purpose of your what you're doing it. We generally use V3, V4 when we do amplicon kind of analysis because it gives us the majority of the bacteria. But each region has like a different, uh, family. So, but majority are covered by V3, V4, so which is very commonly used in most of the analysis.
Okay. His next question is what is the distance that should be maintained while sampling of any metagenomic study? I mean, if I have got the question correctly.
So normally what we do is, suppose when we are looking at, uh, when we did our units, then we divided the area into 3 and we look at, we sample all. Otherwise, there is a statistical method. When we did it in a CTP, there are different statistical tools that you can use. So depending on the area, for the CTP that we used, so the area came out as 9 samples. So then we pick all of them and pool it and make it into a common, a homogeneous sample. So depending on your area, those kind of, the number depends on that.
Okay. Ankita has asked Why only 16S rRNA? Why not any other marker gene? Say, for example, core gene in bacteria.
For example,
Core gene, any core gene in bacteria.
because the database for 16S RNA is so far maximum reported. So if you are using any other marker and you don't have a data, then it's going to affect your analysis. You will probably lose that point. So you look at 16S as the major source, but this you can overcome by doing the complete metagenome. When you do a complete metagenome, then you have many different markers in that you can use to identify your bacteria.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Arun Pandian. One second. Yeah, he's asking, will the usage of treated water increase the chance of multi-drug resistance microbiome on human skin? If so, what is the way to avoid this problem?
It is not about the use of treated water that is going to increase your multi-drug resistant marker. They are already present in our current scenario. So treated water should actually put in a point of disinfection so that it does not your pathogens are not being allowed to release into the environment. So far all your CPCB norms, everything, they look at say E. coli as an indicator, and they look at BOD levels. So these are, they are standard numbers for all these parameters, but nobody so far looks at multi-drug resistance at all as a marker. It's not really easy to detect, which is why, but we have to develop some terms, simple tools that should make this also mandatory. It's just a matter of disinfection. When you do chlorination, all your water comes from your treatment plants is chlorinated, but the reason why chlorination cannot be done very efficiently in these nalas is because they directly meet a water body, and if you have residual chlorine, you're going to cause a danger to the aquatic microflora and fauna that is there. So there are a lot of challenges to address this kind. There is no one size solution for, like I said, that fits everything. You have to develop for each niche, you have to develop a separate a solution to help us spread. But the main thing is, if the responsibility of all the citizens, if they take it up and segregate their waste, don't throw your medicines indiscriminately, unused medicines into your garbage or into which goes into your nalas, that will be a very big major step in controlling the spread of multi-drug resistance. So the onus is also on the citizens of India.
Okay, ma'am, next question is from Mr. T. Swaminathan. Is asking, do you feel that your study may be able to show if there is any genetic immunity of Indian population to COVID-19 to confirm the high recovery rates in India?
So actually, that's not my study. Like I said, that is being done in different CSR labs. I work in the area of environment, so I'm not an expert. I just wanted to highlight to you what CSR is doing in this field. But yes, immunity is dependent on the individual. So sequencing the virus will not give you whether the Indian population is immune to it or not.
Okay. Next question is, there are a lot of questions coming up. Next question is how to differentiate pathogenic and non-pathogenic bacterial samples from metagenomic samples. I mean, how to differentiate between pathogenic and non-pathogenic bacteria from a metagenomic sample. Can we do that?
So I'm not very sure I understood this question right. A metagenome sample means it's a collection of DNA. You take a niche, say from wastewater water or a sludge or garden soil, and you extract the total DNA. Now that becomes the metagenome. Okay. Now from DNA you can't look at DNA and say this is ABC or XYZ. You have to sequence that complete metagenome, and once those sequences are annotated, then you go on to different bioinformatic tools and you identify those DNA sequences. So then when you do your analysis, yes, you can say that these many pathogenic organisms and these many non-pathogenic, that you can say after your sequencing is done.
Like once we are, I feel once we are done with the species level annotation, we can figure out how many of them are, like as you said, how many of them are
Yeah, of
pathogenic and
course.
not
Yeah.
pathogenic.
And you have different virulence genes. So you map
Right.
those genes and then trace it to which bacteria they are coming from. Like,
E- Exactly, ma'am. Uh, Another question is they're asking your views on single copy versus multiple copy gene selection for diversity analysis.
sorry, what was that?
Single copy versus multi copy gene selection for diversity analysis.
So when we do a diversity analysis, when we are taking a metagenome, we don't really know how many copies are going to be there. So which is why these days there are different techniques, and they say you have to do deep sequencing to so that you don't miss the ones that are in low copy number. And of course it is a very easy thing to miss. So which is why normally when you do an analysis, you do it in triplicates and you generate more amount of data, so you don't miss those. But then again, it depends on the purpose of why you are doing it, you know? So for some reasons you don't need to look at every single bacteria that are present in that niche. And for example, if I'm looking at biodegradation, then I want to look at what is the dominant pathways that are operating in that niche. And if I'm looking at a microbial diversity perspective, then I don't want to miss the low copy numbers. So then again, the depth of your sequencing will depend on the purpose of your analysis.
Okay. Sri Pranav is asking, is there any bioinformatic tool for effective analysis of antibiotic mechanism in a pathogen's genome sequence?
Is there a, sorry,
Is there
your
any,
voice?
yeah, is there any bioinformatic tool for the effective analysis of antibiotic mechanism in a pathogen's genome sequence? Uh,
You know,
I
yeah,
I think there are databases available. There's
yeah.
card
There are many
database. Yeah,
database. There
right.
are many databases
Yes.
available.
One of them which we use very regularly here, like in even in Bionavid when we do the analysis part, is the card database.
Yeah,
So
so many are there
yes,
available.
yes, ma'am. Uh,
Yeah,
Next question is from Ankita. She's asking, we are reading these days that gut bacteria acts as your second brain. Your view about the same?
yeah, of course, it's true. You know, there are more number of bacteria in your gut than there are cells in your body. So there are many people say you are what you eat.
Right. Again, Dr. Pankaj Kumar J. Rathod, he's asking to show the flow chart of metagenomics analysis. So, hello, am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So, Dr. Pankaj Kumar J. Rathod, he's asking, can you show the flow chart of metagenomics analysis? So, I think I'll I'll take that question, ma'am, because
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
yeah.
your company does that.
Yes,
So
yes. So basically from our post the sequencing, once the sequencing is done, we get files in a FASTQ format. Those files are then subjected to something which we known as OTU generation. So you follow, there are tools, there's UPass, there's Chime. All these tools are used to construct OTUs from those FASTQ files. So OTUs are nothing but uh, species level representations which we have obtained from our FASTQ files. Once those OTUs are constructed, then we annotate them against reference databases which are available so that we can get a species level identification of all the bacterial species that were present in our sample, and then further depending on the depth that you want to get in your analysis, you can go for alpha beta diversity analysis and rarefaction curve. All these things can be done once you obtain as information about the species level annotation of all the bacterial species which are present in your sample.
Yeah, and also there are many bioinformatic pipelines, but you have to you have to develop also your own. They are not available for every answer. So there are a lot of that's the dearth we have today. The challenge is not in doing the metagenome sequencing, but in mining that data. That's the bigger challenge that's faced today, and there are many experts who help you to develop these kind of pipelines.
Right.
So, but normally you can go to MGRAST and get the basic information.
Correct.
But if you want to do more mining, then you go to people like Bioinnovate who will help us to do it.
Mr. T. Swaminathan, again, he's asking, are there any downsides / problems of metagenomic analysis, particularly for COVID analysis?
So downside, there is no downside, because, this is not like something that, like the primary, like for example, you say the primary healthcare workers, who are working with direct patients, and they can get infected, so that is a risk that they take. But when you do a metagenome, you're just converting everything into a DNA, and a virus without its sheath is not dangerous at all. I mean, it's basically not infectable, so there's no downside. The only thing is that it's really tricky to be able to sequence that from an environmental niche, because if you have 2 COVID samples and you have millions of other bacteria that are floating in the water or sand, so that is a challenge. It's not a downside, I would say.
Okay. Mr. Jagdish is asking, how can we relate the culture-based studies of bacteria with metagenomics?
Okay, so culture, like I said in my lecture also, culture based gives you only 5% of the diversity that is really there. So it is a very limited sphere that you are looking at, and metagenome will give you everything, whether it's culturable or not culturable. So, but the problem here is that you cannot go back and say, ki, I need to isolate this culture. Suppose you have identified an unculturable bacteria that has the genes that you are looking for in your metagenome. You cannot go back to that soil and say, I want to get that single bacteria out. That's really very difficult task to do. But if you want information, then there is no comparison between culture techniques and metagenomics. Metagenomics gives
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The next question is role of rumen microbiomes in probiotics.
Yeah.
They're asking some details.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is a group in NIRI, not me, but there is a group in NIRI who is working exactly on that. So they are looking at different samples from different gut, and looking at to find out probiotics from that. Because you see, if you look at our population, we have different pockets in the country. Some is rice eating population, some is like wheat eating population, some are vegetarian, some are non-vegetarian, some. So you have all these kind of combinations of populations in the country. So if you are going to be analyzing these gut microflora and relate it to a particular disease, say for example diabetes, so then you correlate. It's a really long and tedious task that has started. So then you correlate this kind of bacteria in this gut are they are more prone to say this. And if you have these kind of bacteria, you are less prone, so you use this bacteria as a as a probiotic. Like for now, they do this lactobacillus, and you have these cultures. Even when you are taking antibiotics these days, they give you probiotics with them to keep your gut microflora from getting washed out with antibiotics. So it's a mm, a very interesting field, and it requires hell of a lot of research actually.
Okay. I think we are done with all the questions. Yeah, we are done with all the questions, ma'am.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and interacting with us and all the participants and sharing with them all your research experience. Thank you so much, ma'am.
And thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored and I'm really happy to be here. So,
It has been our pleasure, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you for
and
the
for
lecture.
all the participants who logged on to listen, thank you so much. And I'm really sorry that some parts had a problem with audio, but that's Wi-Fi for you.
Yeah, the network is pretty loaded nowadays.
Yeah,
So
I'm so sorry about that.
no,
Yeah.
no, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you for patiently waiting and being part of this webinar. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.